comes what is fitting, and from it there comes rain and fruitfulness and prosperity and dew. And through the third portal, which lies toward the north, come cold and drought. And after these come forth the south winds through 3 portals. Through the first portal of them, inclining to the east, comes forth a hot wind. And through the middle portal next to it, there come forth fragrant smells, and dew, and rain, and prosperity, and health. And through the third portal lying in the west come forth dew and rain, locusts and desolation. And after these the north winds. From the 7th portal in the east come dew and rain, locusts and devastation. And from the middle portal come in a direct direction health and rain and dew and prosperity. And through the third portal in the west come cloud and hoarfrost and snow and rain and dew and locusts. And after these 4 are the west winds. Through the first portal adjoining the north come forth dew and hoarfrost, and cold and snow and frost. And from the middle portal come forth dew and rain, and prosperity and blessing. And through the last portal, which adjoins the south, come forth drought and desolation, and burning and destruction. And the 12 portals of the 4 quarters of the heaven are therewith completed, and all their laws, and all their plagues, and all their benefactions I have shown to thee, my son Methuselah. And the first quarter is called the east, because it is the first, and the second the south, because the Most High will descend there. Yea, there in quite a special sense will he who is blessed forever descend. And the west quarter is named the diminished, because there all the luminaries of heaven wane and go down. And the 4th quarter, named the north, is divided into 3 parts. The first of them is for the dwelling of men, and the second contains seas of water, and the abysses and forests and rivers, and darkness and clouds. And the third part contains the garden of righteousness. I saw 7 high mountains, higher than all the mountains which are on the earth, and thence comes forth hoarfrost, and days, seasons, and years pass away. I saw 7 rivers on the earth, larger than all the rivers. One of them, coming from the west, pours its waters into the great sea. And these 2 come from the north to the sea, and pour their waters into the Erythraean Sea in the east. And the remaining 4 come forth on the side of the north to their own sea, 2 of them to the Erythraean Sea, and 2 into the great sea, and discharge themselves there, and some say into the desert. 7 great islands I saw in the sea, and in the mainland, 2 in the mainland, and 5 in the great sea. And the names of the sun are the following: the first, Orhares; the second, Tomas. And the moon has 4 names. The first name is Asonja, the second, Ebla, the third, Benasse, and the 4th, Erae. These are the 2 great luminaries. Their circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and the size of the circumference of both is alike. In the circumference of the sun there are 7 portions of light, which are added to it more than to the moon, and in definite measures it is transferred till the 7th portion of the sun is exhausted. And they set and enter the portals of the west, and make their revolution by the north, and come forth through the eastern portals on the face of the heaven. And when the moon rises 1/14th part, it appears in the heaven, and the light becomes full in her. On the 14th day she accomplishes her light. And 15 parts of light are transferred to her till the 15th day, when her light is accomplished, according to the sign of the year, and she becomes 15 parts, and the moon grows by the addition of 14 parts. And in her waning the moon decreases on the first day to 14 parts of her light, and on the second to 13 parts of her light, and on the third to 12, on the 4th to 11, on the 5th to 10, on the 6th to 9, on the 7th to 8, on the 8th to 7, on the 9th to 6th, on the 10th to 5, on the 11th to 4, on the 12th to 3, on the 13th to 2, on the 14th to the half of a 7th, and all her remaining light disappears wholly on the 15th. And in certain months the month has 29 days, and once 28. And Uriel showed me another law, when light is transferred to the moon, and on which side it is transferred to her by the sun. During all the period during which the moon is growing in her light, she is transferring it to herself when opposite to the sun during 14 days. her light is accomplished in the heaven. And when she is illuminated throughout, her light is accomplished full in the heaven. And on the first day she is called the new moon, for on that day the light rises upon her. She becomes full moon exactly on the day when the sun sets in the west, and from the east she rises at night. And the moon shines the whole night through till the sun rises over against her, and the moon is seen over against the sun, on the side whence the light of the moon comes forth. There again she wanes till the light vanishes, and all the days of the month are at an end, and her circumference is empty, void of light. And 3 months she makes of 30 days, and at her time she makes 3 months of 29 days each, in which she accomplishes her waning in the first period of time, and in the first portal for 177 days. And in the time of her going out she appears for 3 months of 30 days each, and for 3 months she appears of 29 days each. At night she appears like a man for 20 days each time, and by day she appears like the heaven, and there is nothing else in her save her light. And now, my son, I have shown thee everything, and the laws of all the stars of heaven is completed. And he showed me all the laws of these for every day, and for every season of bearing rule, and for every year, and for its going forth, and for the order prescribed to it every month and every week, and the waning of the moon which takes place in the 6th portal. For in this 6th portal her light is accomplished. And after that there is the beginning of the waning. And the waning, which takes place in the 1st portal in its season, till 177 days are accomplished, reckoned according to weeks, 25 weeks and 2 days. She falls behind the sun in the order of the stars exactly 5 days in the course of one period. And when this place which thou seest has been traversed, such is the picture and sketch of every luminary which Uriel the archangel, who is their leader, showed unto me. And in those days the angel Uriel answered and said to me, Behold, I have shown thee everything, Enoch, and I have revealed everything to thee, that thou shouldest see this sun and this moon, and the leaders of the stars of the heaven, and all those who turn them, their tasks, and times, and departures. And in the days of the sinners the years shall be shortened, and their seed shall be tardy in their lands and fields. And all things on the earth shall alter, and shall not appear in their time. And the rain shall be kept back, and the heaven shall withhold it. And in those times the fruits of the earth shall be backward, and shall not grow in their time. And the fruits of the trees shall be withheld in their time. And the moon shall alter her order, and not appear at her time. And in those days the sun shall be seen, and he shall journey in the evening on the extremity of the great chariot in the west, and shall shine more brightly than accords with the order of light. And many chiefs of the stars shall transgress the order prescribed, and these shall alter their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. And the whole order of the stars shall be concealed from the sinners, and the thoughts of those on the earth shall err concerning them. And they shall be altered from all their ways. Yea, they shall err and take them to be gods. And evil shall be multiplied upon them, and punishment shall come upon them, so as to destroy all. And he said unto me, Observe, Enoch, these heavenly tablets, and read what is written thereon, and mark every individual fact. And I observed the heavenly tablets, and read everything which was written thereon, and understood everything, and read the book of all the deeds of mankind, and of all the children of flesh that shall be upon the earth, to the remotest generations. And forthwith I blessed the great Lord, the King of glory, forever, in that he has made all the works of the world. And I extolled the Lord because of his patience, and I blessed him because of the children of men. And after that I said, Blessed is the man who dies in righteousness and goodness, concerning whom there is no book of unrighteousness written, and against whom no day of judgment shall be found. And those 7 holy ones brought me and placed me on the earth before the door of my house, and said to me, Declare everything to thy son Methuselah, and show to all thy children that no flesh is righteous in the sight of the Lord, for he is their creator. 1 year will we leave thee with thy son, till thou givest thy last commands, that thou mayest teach thy children, and record it for them, and testify to all thy children. And in the 2nd year they shall take thee from their midst. Let thy heart be strong, for the good shall announce righteousness to the good. The righteous with the righteous shall rejoice, and shall offer congratulations to one another. But the sinners shall die with the sinners, and the apostate go down with the apostate. And those who practice righteousness shall die on account of the deeds of men, and be taken away on account of the doings of the godless. And in those days they ceased to speak to me, and I came to my people, blessing the Lord of the world. And now, my son Methuselah, all these things I am recounting to thee, and writing down for thee. I have revealed to thee everything, and given thee books concerning all these. So preserve, my son Methuselah, the books from thy father's hand, and see that thou deliver them to the generations of the world. I have given wisdom to thee and to thy children, and thy children that shall be to thee, that they may give it to their children for generations, this wisdom, namely that passeth their thought. And those who understand it shall not sleep, but shall listen with the ear, that they may learn this wisdom. And it shall please those that eat thereof better than good food. Blessed are all the righteous. Blessed are all those who walk in the way of righteousness, and sin not as the sinners, in the reckoning of all their days in which the sun traverses the heaven, entering into and departing from the portals for 30 days with the head of thousands of the order of the stars, together with the 4 which are intercalated, which divide the 4 portions of the year, which lead them and enter with them for 4 days. Owing to them men shall be at fault, and not reckon them in the whole reckoning of the year. Yea, men shall be at fault, and not recognize them accurately, for they belong to the reckoning of the year, and are truly recorded thereon forever. 1 in the 1st portal, and 1 in the 3rd, and 1 in the 4th, and 1 in the 6th. And the year is completed in 364 days. And the account thereof is accurate, and the recorded reckoning thereof exact. For the luminaries, and the months, and festivals, and years, and days, has Uriel shown and revealed to me, to whom the Lord of the whole creation of the world hath subjected the host of heaven. And he has power over night and day in the heaven, to cause the light to give light to men, sun, moon, and stars, and all the powers of the heaven, which revolve in their circular chariots. And these are the orders of the stars, which set in their places, and in their seasons, and festivals, and months. And these are the names of those who lead them, who watch that they enter at their times, in their orders, in their seasons, in their months, in their periods of dominion, and in their positions. There are 4 leaders who divide the 4 parts of the year enter first, and after them the 12 leaders of the orders who divide the months. And for the 360 days there are heads over thousands who divide the days, and for the 4 intercalary days there are the leaders which sunder the 4 parts of the year. And these heads over thousands are intercalated between leader and leader, each behind a station. But their leaders make the division. And these are the names of the leaders who divide the 4 parts of the year, which are ordained: Milkiel, Helimelech, and Melechal, and Narel, and the names of those who lead them: Adnarel, and Ijasusael, and Alomael. These 3 follow the leaders of the orders, and there is one that follows the 3 leaders of the orders which follow those leaders of stations that divide the 4 parts of the year. In the beginning of the year, Melchihal rises first and rules, who is named Tamaini, and son, and all the days of his dominion whilst he bears rule are 91 days. And these are the signs of the days, which are to be seen on earth in the days of his dominion: sweat, and heat, and calms, and the trees bear fruit, and leaves are produced on all the trees, and the harvest of wheat, and the rose flowers, and all the flowers which come forth in the field, but the trees of the winter season become withered. And these are the names of the leaders which are under them: Berkael, Zelebsel, and another who is added a head of 1,000, called Helujaseph. And the days of the dominion of this leader are at an end. The next leader after him is Elimelech, whom one names the shining sun, and all the days of his light are 91 days. And these are the sign of his days on the earth: glowing heat and dryness, and the trees ripen their fruits and produce all their fruits ripe and ready. And the sheep pair and become pregnant, and all the fruits of the earth are gathered in, and everything that is in the fields, and in the winepress. These things take place in the days of his dominion. These are the names and the orders and the leaders of those heads of thousands: Gidaijal, Keel, and Hael, and the name of the head of 1,000 which is added to them, Asphael, and the days of his dominion are at an end. And now, my son Methuselah, I will show thee all my visions which I have seen, recounting them before thee. 2 visions I saw before I took a wife, and the one was quite unlike the other. The first when I was learning to write, the second before I took thy mother, when I saw a terrible vision. And regarding them I prayed to the Lord, and he laid me down in the house of my grandfather Mahalalel. When I saw in a vision how the heaven collapsed, and was borne off, and fell to the earth. And when it fell to the earth, I saw how the earth was swallowed up in a great abyss, and mountains were suspended on mountains, and hills sank down on hills, and high trees were rent from their stems, and hurled down and sunk in the abyss. And thereupon a word fell into my mouth, and I lifted up my voice to cry aloud, and said, The earth is destroyed. And my grandfather Mahalalel waked me as I lay near him, and said unto me, Why dost thou cry so, my son? And why dost thou make such lamentation? And I recounted to him the whole vision which I had seen. And he said unto me, A terrible thing hast thou seen, my son, and of grave moment is thy dream vision. As to the secrets of all the sin of the earth, it must sink into the abyss and be destroyed with a great destruction. And now, my son, arise and make petition to the Lord of glory, since thou art a believer, that a remnant may remain on the earth, and that he may not destroy the whole earth. My son, from heaven all this will come upon the earth, and upon the earth there will be great destruction. After that I arose and prayed and implored and besought, and wrote down my prayer for the generation of the world, and I will show everything to thee, my son Methuselah. And when I had gone forth below and seen the heaven, and the sun rising in the east, and the moon setting in the west, and a few stars, and the whole earth, and everything as he had known it in the beginning, then I blessed the Lord of judgment, and extolled him, because he had made the sun to go forth from the windows of the east, and he ascended and rose on the face of the heaven, and set out, and kept traversing the path shown unto him. And I lifted up my hands in righteousness, and blessed the Holy and Great One, and spake with the breath of my mouth, and with the tongue of flesh, which God has made for the children of the flesh of men, that they should speak therewith. And he gave them breath, and a tongue, and a mouth, that they should speak therewith. Blessed be thou, O Lord, King, great and mighty in thy greatness, Lord of the whole creation of the heaven, King of kings, and God of the whole world. And thy power and kingship and greatness abide forever and ever. And throughout all generations thy dominion, and all the heavens are thy throne forever, and the whole earth thy footstool forever and ever. For thou hast made, and thou rulest all things, and nothing is too hard for thee. Wisdom departs not from the place of thy throne, nor turns away from thy presence. And thou knowest, and seest, and hearest everything. And there is nothing hidden from thee, for thou seest everything. And now the angels of thy heavens are guilty of trespass, and upon the flesh of men abideth thy wrath, until the great day of judgment. And now, O God, and Lord, and great King, I implore and beseech thee to fulfill my prayer, to leave me a posterity on earth, and not destroy all the flesh of man, and make the earth without inhabitant, so that there should be an eternal destruction. And now, my Lord, destroy from the earth the flesh which has aroused thy wrath, but the flesh of righteousness and uprightness establish as the plant of the eternal seed. And hide not thy face from the prayer of thy servant, O Lord. And after this I saw another dream, and I will show the whole dream to thee, my son. And Enoch lifted up his voice, and spake to his son Methuselah, To thee, my son, will I speak. Hear my words. Incline thine ear to the dream vision of thy father. Before I took thy mother Edna, I saw in a vision on my bed, and behold, a bull came forth from the earth. And that bull was white, and after it came forth a heifer. And along with this latter came forth two bulls, one of them black, and the other red. And that black bull gored the red one, and pursued him over the earth, and thereupon I could no longer see that red bull. But that black bull grew, and that heifer went with him. And I saw that many oxen proceeded from him, which resembled and followed him. And that cow, that first one, went from the presence of that first bull in order to seek that red one, but found him not, and lamented with a great lamentation over him, and sought him. And I looked till that first bull came to her, and quieted her. And from that time onwards she cried no more. And after that she bore another white bull, and after him she bore many bulls, and black cows. And I saw in my sleep that white bull likewise grow, and become a great white bull. And from him proceeded many great white bulls, and they resembled him. And they began to beget many white bulls which resembled them, one following the other, even many. And again I saw with mine eyes as I slept, and I saw the heaven above. And behold, a star fell from heaven, and it arose and ate and pastured amongst those oxen. But after that I saw the large and the black oxen. And behold, they all changed their stalls and pastures and their cattle, and began to live with each other. And again I saw in the vision, and looked towards the heaven. And behold, I saw many stars descend and cast themselves down from heaven to that first star. And they became bulls among those cattle, and they pastured with them. And I looked at them and saw, and behold, they all let out their privy members, like horses, and began to cover the cows of the oxen. And they all became pregnant, and bare elephants, camels, and asses. And all the oxen feared them, and were affrighted at them. And they began to bite with their teeth, and to devour, and to gore with their horns. And they began moreover to devour those oxen. And behold, all the children of the earth began to tremble and quake before them, and to flee from them. And again I saw how they began to gore each other, and to devour each other. And the earth began to cry aloud. And I raised mine eyes again to heaven, and I saw in the vision, and behold, there came forth from heaven beings who were like white men, and 4 went forth from that place, and 3 with them. And those 3 that had come forth last grasped me by my hand, and took me up, away from the generations of the earth, and raised me up to a lofty place, and showed me a tower raised high above the earth, and all the hills were lower. And one said unto me, Remain here till thou seest everything that befalls those elephants, camels, and asses, and the stars, and the oxen, and all of them. And I saw one of those 4 who had come forth first, and he seized that first star which had fallen from the heaven, and bound it hand and foot, and cast it into an abyss. Now that abyss was narrow and deep, and horrible and dark. And one of them drew a sword, and gave it to those elephants and camels and asses. Then they began to smite each other, and the whole earth quaked because of them. And I was beholding in the vision, lo, one of those 4 who had come forth stoned them from heaven, and gathered and took all the great stars whose privy members were like those of horses, and bound them all hand and foot, and cast them into an abyss of the earth. And one of those 4 went to that white bull, and instructed him in a secret, without his being terrified. And he was born a bull, and became a man, and built for himself a great vessel, and dwelt thereon. And 3 bulls dwelt with him in that vessel, and they were covered in. And again I raised mine eyes towards heaven, and saw a lofty roof, with 7 water torrents thereon. And those torrents flowed with much water into an enclosure. And I saw again, and behold, fountains were open on the surface of that great enclosure. And that water began to swell and to rise upon the surface. And I saw that enclosure till all its surface was covered with water. And the water, the darkness, and mist increased upon it. And as I looked at the height of that water, That water had risen above the height of that enclosure, and was streaming over that enclosure, and it stood upon the earth. And all the cattle of that enclosure were gathered together, until I saw how they sank, and were swallowed up, and perished in that water. But that vessel floated on the water, while all the oxen and elephants and camels and asses sank to the bottom with all the animals, so that I could no longer see them, and they were not able to escape, but perished and sank into the depths. And again I saw in the vision till those water torrents were removed from that high roof, and the chasms of the earth were leveled up, and other abysses were opened. Then the water began to run down into these, till the earth became visible. But that vessel settled on the earth, and the darkness retired, and light appeared. But that white bull which had become a man came out of that vessel, and the 3 bulls with him. And one of those 3 was white like that bull, and one of them was red as blood, and one black. And that white bull departed from them. And they began to bring forth beasts in the field, and birds, so that there arose different generations, tigers, wolves, dogs, hyenas, wild boars, foxes, squirrels, swine, falcons, vultures, kites, eagles, and ravens. And among them was born a white bull. And they began to bite one another. But that white bull which was born amongst them begat a wild ass, and white bull with it. And the wild asses multiplied. But that white bull which was born from him begat a black wild boar and a white sheep. And the former begat many boars, but that sheep begat 12 sheep. And when those 12 sheep had grown, they gave up one of them to the asses, and those asses again gave up that sheep to the wolves. And that sheep grew up among the wolves. And the Lord brought the 11 sheep to live with it, and to pasture with it among the wolves. And they multiplied, and became many flocks of sheep. And the wolves began to fear them, and they oppressed them until they destroyed their little ones, and they cast their young into a river of much water. But those sheep began to cry aloud on account of their little ones, and to complain unto their Lord. And the sheep which had been saved from the wolves fled and escaped to the wild asses. And I saw the sheep, how they lamented and cried, and besought their Lord with all their might. So the Lord of the sheep descended at the voice of the sheep from a lofty abode, and came to them and pastured them. And he called that sheep which had escaped the wolves, and spake with it concerning the wolves, that it should admonish them not to touch the sheep. And the sheep went to the wolves according to the word of the Lord. And another sheep met it, and went with it. And the 2 went and entered together into the assembly of those wolves, and spake with them, and admonished them not to touch the sheep from henceforth. And thereupon I saw the wolves, and how they oppressed the sheep exceedingly with all their power. And the sheep cried aloud, and the Lord came to the sheep, and they began to smite those wolves. And the wolves began to make lamentation, but the sheep became quiet, and forthwith ceased to cry out. And I saw the sheep till they departed from amongst the wolves. But the eyes of the wolves were blinded. And those wolves departed in pursuit of the sheep with all their power. And the Lord of the sheep went with them as their leader, and all his sheep followed him, and his face was dazzling and glorious and terrible to behold. But the wolves began to pursue those sheep till they reached the sea of water. And the sea was divided, and the water stood on this side and on that before their face. And their Lord led them, and placed himself between them and the wolves. And as those wolves did not yet see the sheep, they proceeded into the midst of that sea, and the wolves followed the sheep, and those wolves ran after them into that sea. And when they saw the Lord of the sheep, they turned to flee before his face. But that sea gathered itself together, and became as it had been created. And the water swelled and rose till it covered those wolves. And I saw till all the wolves who pursued those sheep perished and were drowned. But the sheep escaped from that water, and went forth into a wilderness, where there was no water and no grass. And they began to open their eyes and to see. And I saw the Lord of the sheep pasturing them, and giving them water and grass. And that sheep going and leading them, and that sheep ascended to the summit of the lofty rock. And the Lord of the sheep sent it to them. And after that I saw the Lord of the sheep who stood before them, and his appearance was white, and terrible, and majestic. And all those sheep saw him, and were afraid before his face. And they all feared and trembled because of him, and they cried to that sheep with them, which was amongst them, We are not able to stand before our Lord, or to behold him. And that sheep which led them again ascended to the summit of that rock. But the sheep began to be blinded, and to wander from the way which he had showed them. But that sheep wot not thereof. And the Lord of the sheep was wrathful exceedingly against them. And that sheep discovered it, and went down from the summit of the rock, and came to the sheep, and found the greatest part of them blinded and fallen away. And when they saw it, they feared and trembled at its presence, and desired to return to their folds. And that sheep took other sheep with it, and came to those sheep which had fallen away, and began to slay them. And the sheep feared its presence, and thus that sheep brought back those sheep that had fallen away, and they returned to their folds. And I saw in this vision till that sheep became a man, and built a house for the Lord of the sheep, and placed all of the sheep in that house. And I saw till this sheep, which had met that sheep, which had led them to fall asleep. And I saw all the great sheep perished, and little ones arose in their place. And they came to a pasture, and approached a stream of water. Then that sheep, their leader, which had become a man, withdrew from them, and fell asleep. And all the sheep sought it, and cried over it with a great crying. And I saw till they left off crying for that sheep, and crossed that stream of water. And there arose the two sheep as leaders in the place of those which had led them and fallen asleep. And I saw till the sheep came to a goodly place, and a pleasant and glorious land. And I saw till those sheep were satisfied, and that house stood amongst them in that pleasant land. And sometimes their eyes were opened, and sometimes blinded, till another sheep arose and led them, and brought them all back, and their eyes were opened. And the dogs and the foxes and the wild boars began to devour those sheep, till the Lord of the sheep raised up another sheep, a ram from their midst, which led them. And that ram began to butt on either side of those dogs, foxes, and wild boars, till he had destroyed them all. And that sheep whose eyes were opened saw that ram, which was amongst the sheep, till it forsook its glory, and began to butt those sheep, and trample upon them, and behaved itself unseemly. And the Lord of the sheep sent the lamb to another lamb, and raised it to being a ram and leader of the sheep, instead of that ram which had forsaken its glory. And it went to it, and spoke to it alone, and raised it to being a ram, and made it the prince and leader of the sheep. But during all these things those dogs oppressed the sheep. And the first ram pursued that second ram, and that second ram arose and fled before it. And I saw till those dogs pulled down the first ram. And that second ram arose and led the little sheep, and those sheep grew and multiplied. But all the dogs and foxes and wild boars feared and fled before it. And that ram butted and killed the wild beasts. And those wild beasts had no longer any power amongst the sheep, and robbed them no more of aught. And that ram begat many sheep, and fell asleep. And a little sheep became ram in its stead, and became a prince and a leader of those sheep. And that house became great and broad, and it was built for those sheep. And a tower lofty and great was built on the house for the Lord of the sheep. And that house was low, but the tower was elevated and lofty. And the Lord of the sheep stood on that tower, and they offered a full table before him. And again I saw those sheep, that they again erred, and went many ways, and forsook that their house. And that the Lord of the sheep called some from amongst the sheep, and sent them to the sheep. But the sheep began to slay them. And one of them was saved, and was not slain. And it sped away, and cried aloud over the sheep. And they sought to slay it. But the Lord of the sheep saved it from the sheep, and brought it up to me, and caused it to dwell there. And many other sheep he sent to those sheep, to testify unto them, and lament over them. And after that I saw that when they forsook the house of the Lord and his tower, they fell away entirely, and their eyes were blinded. And I saw the Lord of the sheep, how he wrought much slaughter amongst them in their herds, until those sheep invited that slaughter, and betrayed his place. And he gave them over into the hands of the lions and tigers, and wolves and hyenas, and into the hand of the foxes, and to all the wild beasts. And those wild beasts began to tear in pieces those sheep. And I saw that he forsook that their house and their tower, and gave them all into the hand of the lions, to tear and devour them, into the hand of all the wild beasts. And I began to cry aloud with all my power, and to appeal to the Lord of the sheep, and to represent to him in regard to the sheep, that they were devoured by all the wild beasts. But he remained unmoved, though he saw it, and rejoiced that they were devoured and swallowed and robbed, and left them to be devoured in the hand of all the beasts. And he called 70 shepherds, and cast those sheep to them, that they may pasture them. And he spake to the shepherds and their companions, Let each individual of you pasture the sheep henceforward, and everything that I shall command that you do, do ye. And I will deliver them over to you duly numbered, and tell you which of them are to be destroyed, and them destroy ye. And he gave over unto them those sheep, and he called another, and spake unto him, Observe and mark everything that the shepherds will do to those sheep, for they will destroy more of them than I have commanded them. In every excess and the destruction which will be wrought through those shepherds record, namely how many they destroy according to my command, and how many according to their own caprice, record. Against every individual shepherd all the destruction he effects. And read out before me by number how many they destroy, and how many they deliver over for destruction, that I may have this as a testimony against them, and know every deed of the shepherds, that I may comprehend and see what they do, whether or not they abide by my command which I have commanded them. But they shall not know it, and thou shalt not declare it to them, nor admonish them, but only record against each individual all the destruction which the shepherds effect, each in his time, and lay it all before me. And I saw till those shepherds pastured in their season, and they began to slay and to destroy more than they were bidden. And they delivered those sheep into the hands of the lions, and the lions and tigers ate and devoured the greater part of those sheep, and the wild boars ate along with them. And they burnt that tower and demolished that house. And I became exceedingly sorrowful over that tower, because that house of the sheep was demolished. And afterwards I was unable to see if those sheep entered that house. And the shepherds and their associates delivered over those sheep to all the wild beasts, to devour them, and each one of them received in his time a definite number. It was written by the other in a book, how many each one of them destroyed of them, and each one slew and destroyed many more than was prescribed. And I began to weep and lament on account of those sheep. And thus in the vision I saw that one who wrote, how he wrote down every one that was being destroyed by those shepherds, day by day, and carried up and laid down and showed actually the whole book to the Lord of the sheep, even everything that they had done, and all that each one of them had made away with, and all that they had given over to destruction. And the book was read before the Lord of the sheep. And he took the book from his hand, and read it, and sealed it, and laid it down. And forthwith I saw how the shepherds pastured for 12 hours. And behold, 3 of those sheep turned back, and came and entered, and began to build up all that had fallen down of that house. But the wild boars tried to hinder them, but they were not able. And they began to build as before, and they reared up that tower, and it was named the High Tower. And they began again to place a table before the tower, but all the bread on it was polluted, and not pure. And as touching all this, the eyes of those sheep were blinded, so that they saw not, the eyes of their shepherds likewise. And they delivered them in large numbers to their shepherds for destruction. And they trampled the sheep with their feet, and devoured them. And the Lord of the sheep remained unmoved, till all the sheep were dispersed over the field, and mingled with them the beasts. And the shepherds did not save them out of the hands of the beasts. And this one who wrote the book carried it up, and showed it, and read it before the Lord of the sheep, and implored him on their account, and besought him on their account, as he showed him all the doings of the shepherds, and gave testimony before him against all the shepherds. And he took the actual book, and laid it down beside him, and departed. And I saw till in that manner 35 shepherds undertook the pasturing of the sheep, and they severally completed their periods, as did the first. And others received them into their hands, to pasture them for their period, each shepherd in his own period. And after that I saw in my vision all the birds of heaven coming, the eagles, the vultures, the kites, the ravens. But the eagles led all the birds, and they began to devour those sheep, and to pick out their eyes, and to devour their flesh. And the sheep cried out, because their flesh was being devoured by the birds. And as for me, I looked and lamented in my sleep over that shepherd who pastured the sheep. And I saw again until those sheep were delivered by the dogs and eagles and kites, and they left neither flesh nor skin nor sinew remaining on them, till only their bones stood there. And their bones too fell to the earth, and the sheep became few. And I saw until that 23 had undertaken the pasturing, and completed their several periods 58 times. But behold, lambs were born by those white sheep, and they began to open their eyes, and to see, and to cry to the sheep. Yea, they cried to them, but they did not hearken to what they said to them, but were exceedingly deaf, and their eyes were very exceedingly blinded. And I saw in the vision how the ravens flew upon those lambs, and took one of those lambs, and dashed the sheep in pieces, and devoured them. And I saw till horns grew upon those lambs, and the ravens cast down their horns. And I saw till there sprouted a great horn of one of those sheep, and their eyes were opened. And it looked at them, and their eyes opened. And it cried to the sheep, and the rams saw it, and all ran to it. And notwithstanding all those eagles and vultures and ravens and kites still kept tearing the sheep and swooping down upon them and devouring them, still the sheep remained silent. But the rams lamented and cried out, and those ravens fought and battled with it, and sought to lay low its horn, but they had no power over it. And I saw till the shepherds and eagles and those vultures and kites came, and they cried to the ravens that they should break the horn of that ram. And they battled and fought with it, and it battled with them, and cried that its help might come. And I saw till a great sword was given to the sheep, and the sheep proceeded against all the beasts of the field to slay them, and all the beasts and the birds of the heaven fled before their face. And I saw that man who wrote the book according to the command of the Lord, till he opened that book concerning the destruction which those 12 last shepherds that wrought, and showed that they had destroyed much more than their predecessors before the Lord of the sheep. And I saw till that man who wrote down the names of the shepherd, and carried up into the presence of the Lord of the sheep, and came and helped it, and showed it everything. He had come down for the help of that ram. And I saw till the Lord of the sheep came unto them, and took in his hand the staff of his wrath, and smote the earth, and the earth clave asunder, and all the beasts and all the birds of heaven fell from among those sheep, and were swallowed up in the earth, and it covered them. And I saw till the Lord of the sheep came unto them in wrath, and all who saw him fled, and they all fell into his shadow from before his face. And I saw till a throne was erected in the pleasant land, and the Lord of the sheep sat himself thereon. And the other took the sealed books, and opened those books before the Lord of the sheep. And the Lord called those men the 7 first white ones, and commanded that they should bring before him, beginning with the first star which led the way, all the stars whose privy members were like those of horses. And they brought them all before him. And he said to that man who wrote before him, being one of those 7 white ones, and said unto him, Take those 70 shepherds to whom I delivered the sheep, and who taking them on their own authority slew more than I had commanded them. And behold, they were all bound, I saw, and they all stood before him. And the judgment was first held over the stars. And they were judged and found guilty, and went to the place of condemnation. And they were cast into an abyss, full of fire and flaming, and full of pillars of fire. And those 70 shepherds were judged and found guilty, and they were cast into that fiery abyss. And I saw at that time how a like abyss was opened in the midst of the earth, full of fire. And they brought those blinded sheep, and they were all judged and found guilty, and cast into this fiery abyss. And they burned. Now this abyss was to the right of that house. And I saw those sheep burning, and their bones burning. And I stood up to see till they folded up that old house, and carried off all the pillars, and all the beams and ornaments of that house were at the same time folded up with it. And they carried it off, and laid it in a place in the south of the land. And I saw till the Lord of the sheep brought a new house, greater and loftier than the first, and set it up in the place of the first, which had been folded up. And all its pillars were new, and its ornaments were new, and larger than those of the first, and the old one which he had taken away, and all the sheep were within it. And I saw all the sheep which had been left, and all the beasts on the earth, and all the birds of the heaven, falling down and doing homage to those sheep, and making petition to and obeying them in everything. And thereafter those three who were clothed in white, and had seized me by my hand, who had taken me up before, and the hand of that ram also seizing hold of me, they took me up and set me down in the midst of those sheep before the judgment took place. And those sheep were all white, and their wool was abundant and clean. And all that had been destroyed and dispersed, and all the beasts of the field, and all the birds of the heaven assembled in that house. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because they were all good, and had returned to his house. And I saw till they laid down that sword which had been given to the sheep, and they brought it back into the house, and it was sealed before the presence of the Lord. And all the sheep were invited into that house, but it held them not. And the eyes of them all were opened, and they saw the good, and there was not one among them that did not see. And I saw that that house was large and broad and very full. And I saw that a white bull was born, with large horns, and all the beasts of the field, and all the birds of the air feared him, and made petition to him all the time. And I saw till all their generations were transformed, and they all became white bulls. And the first among them became a lamb, and that lamb became a great animal, and it had black horns on its head. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced over it, and over all the oxen. And I slept in their midst, and I awoke, and saw everything. This is the vision which I saw while I slept, and I awoke, and blessed the Lord of righteousness, and gave him glory. Then I wept with a great weeping, and my tears stayed not, till I could no longer endure it. When I saw, they flowed on account of what I had seen. For everything shall come and be fulfilled, and all the deeds of men in their order were shown to me. On that night I remembered the first dream, and because of it I wept, and was troubled because I had seen that vision. Book written by Enoch. Enoch indeed wrote this complete doctrine of wisdom, which is praised of all men, and a judge of all the earth, for all my children who shall dwell on the earth, and for the future generations who shall observe uprightness and peace. Let not your spirit be troubled on account of the times, for the Holy and Great One has appointed days for all things, and the righteous one shall arise from sleep, shall arise and walk in the paths of righteousness, and all his path and conversation shall be in eternal goodness and grace. He will be gracious to the righteous, and give him eternal uprightness. And he will give him power, so that he shall be endowed with goodness and righteousness, and he shall walk in eternal light. And sin shall perish in darkness forever, and shall no more be seen from that day forevermore. And now, my son Methuselah, call to me all thy brothers, and gather before me all the sons of thy mother. For the words call me, and the Spirit is poured out upon me, that I may show you everything that shall befall you forever. And thereupon Methuselah went and summoned to him all his brothers, and assembled his relatives. And he spake unto all the children of righteousness, and said, Hear ye, sons of Enoch, all the words of your father, and hearken aright to the voice of my mouth. For I exhort you, and say unto you, beloved, love uprightness, and walk therein, and draw not nigh to uprightness with a double heart. And associate not with those of a double heart, but walk in righteousness, my sons, and it shall guide you on good paths, and righteousness shall be your companion. For I know that violence must increase on the earth, and great chastisement be executed on the earth. and all unrighteousness come to an end. Yea, it shall be cut off from its roots, and its whole structure be destroyed. And unrighteousness shall again be consummated on the earth. And all the deeds of unrighteousness and of violence and transgression shall prevail in a twofold degree. And when sin and unrighteousness and blasphemy and violence and all kinds of deeds increase, and apostasy and transgression and uncleanness increase, a great chastisement shall come from heaven upon all these. And the Holy Lord will come forth with wrath and chastisement to execute judgment on earth. In those days violence shall be cut off from its roots, and the roots of unrighteousness together with deceit. And they shall be destroyed from under heaven. And all the idols of the heathen shall be abandoned, and the temples burned with fire. And they shall remove them from the whole earth. And the heathen shall be cast into the judgment of fire, and shall perish in wrath and in grievous judgment forever. And the righteous shall arise from their sleep, and wisdom shall arise and be given unto them. And after that the roots of unrighteousness shall be cut off, and the sinner shall be destroyed by the sword. Shall be cut off from the blasphemers in every place, and those who plan violence with those who commit blasphemy shall perish by the sword. And now I tell you, my sons, and show you the paths of righteousness and the paths of violence. Yea, I will show them to you again, that you may know what will come to pass. And now hearken unto me, my sons, and walk in the paths of righteousness, and walk not in the paths of violence, for all who walk in the paths of unrighteousness shall perish forever. And after that Enoch both gave and began to recount from the books. And Enoch said, Concerning the children of righteousness, and concerning the elect of the world, and concerning the plant of uprightness, I will speak these things. Yea, I, Enoch, will declare them unto you, my sons, according to that which appeared to me in the heavenly vision, and which I have known through the word of the holy angels, and have learnt from the heavenly tablets. And Enoch began to recount from the books, and said, I was born the 7th in the 1st week, while judgment and righteousness still endured. And after me there shall arise in the 2nd week great wickedness, and deceit shall have sprung up, and in it there shall be the first end, and in it shall a man be saved. And after it has ended, unrighteousness shall grow up, and a law shall be made for the sinners. And after that, in the 3rd week, at its close, a man shall be elected as the plant of righteous judgment, and his posterity shall become the plant of righteousness forevermore. And after that, in the 4th week, at its close, visions of the holy and righteous shall be seen, and a law for all generations, and an enclosure shall be made for them. And after that, in the 5th week, at its close, the house of glory and dominion shall be built forever. And after that, in the 6th week, all who live in it shall be blinded, and the hearts of all them shall godlessly forsake wisdom, and in it a man shall ascend. And at its close, the house of dominion shall be burnt with fire, and the whole race of the chosen root shall be dispersed. And after that, in the 7th week, shall an apostate generation arise, and many shall be its deeds. And all its deeds shall be apostate. And at its close shall be elected the elect righteous of the eternal plant of righteousness, to receive sevenfold instruction concerning all his creation. For who is there of all the children of men that is able to hear the voice of the Holy One without being troubled? And who can think his thoughts? And who is there that can behold all the works of heaven? And how should there be one who could behold the heaven? And who is there that could understand the things of heaven, and see a soul or a spirit, and could tell thereof, or ascend and see all their ends, and think them, or do like them? And who is there of all men that could know what is the breadth and the length of the earth, and to whom has been shown the measure of all of them? Or is there anyone who could discern the length of the heaven, and how great its height, and upon what it is founded, and how great is the number of the stars, and where all the luminaries rest? And after that there shall be another, the 8th week, that of unrighteousness. And a sword shall be given to it, that a righteous judgment may be executed on the oppressors. And sinners shall be delivered into the hands of the righteous. And at its close they shall acquire houses through their righteousness. And a house shall be built for the great King in glory forevermore. And all mankind shall look to the path of uprightness. And after that, in the 9th week, the righteous judgment shall be revealed to the whole world. And all the works of the godless shall vanish from all the earth, and the world shall be written down for destruction. And after this, in the 10th week, in the 7th part, there shall be the great eternal judgment, in which he will execute vengeance amongst the angels. And the first heaven shall depart and pass away, and a new heaven shall appear, and all the powers of the heavens shall give sevenfold light. And after that there will be many weeks without number forever. And all shall be in goodness and righteousness, and sin shall be no more mentioned forever. And now I say unto you, my sons, love righteousness, and walk therein. For the paths of righteousness are worthy of acceptation. But the paths of unrighteousness shall suddenly be destroyed and vanish. And to certain men of a generation shall the paths of violence and death be revealed. And they shall hold themselves afar from them, and shall not follow them. And now I say unto you, the righteous, walk not in the paths of wickedness, nor in the paths of death, and draw not nigh unto them, lest ye be destroyed. But seek and choose for yourselves righteousness and an elect life, and walk in the paths of peace, and ye shall live and prosper. And hold fast my words in the thoughts of your hearts, and suffer them not to be effaced from your hearts. For I know that sinners will tempt men to evilly entreat wisdom, so that no place may be found for her, and no manner of temptation may minish. Woe to those who build unrighteousness and oppression, and lay deceit as a foundation, for they shall suddenly be overthrown, and they shall have no peace. Woe to those who build their houses with sin, for from all their foundations they will be overthrown, and by the sword shall they fall. And those who acquire gold and silver in judgment suddenly shall perish. Woe to you, ye rich, for you have trusted in your riches, and from your riches ye shall depart, because you have not remembered the Most High in the days of your riches. You have committed blasphemy and unrighteousness, and have become ready for the day of slaughter, and the day of darkness, and the day of the great judgment. Thus I speak and declare unto you, he who hath created you will overthrow you, and for your fall there shall be no compassion, and your Creator will rejoice at your destruction, and your righteous ones in those days shall be a reproach to the sinners and the godless. Oh, that mine eyes were a cloud of waters, that I might weep over you, and pour down my tears as a cloud of waters, so that I might rest from my trouble of heart. Who has permitted you to practice reproaches and wickedness? And so judgment shall overtake you, sinners. Fear not the sinners, you righteous, for again will the Lord deliver them into your hands, that you may execute judgment upon them according to your desires. Woe to you who fulminate anathemas which cannot be reversed. Healings therefore shall be far from you because of your sins. Woe to you who requite your neighbor with evil, for ye shall be requited according to your works. Woe to you, lying witnesses, and to those who weigh out injustice, for suddenly shall you perish. Woe to you, sinners, for you persecute the righteous, for ye shall be delivered up, and persecuted because of injustice, and heavy shall be its yoke upon you. Be hopeful, you righteous, for suddenly shall the sinners perish before you, and ye shall have lordship over them according to your desires. In the day of the tribulation of the sinners, your children shall mount and rise as eagles, and higher than the vultures will be your nest. And ye shall ascend and enter the crevices of the earth, and the clefts of the rock, forever as conies before the unrighteous. And the sirens shall sigh because of you, and weep. Wherefore fear not, ye that have suffered, for healing shall be your portion, and a bright light shall enlighten you, and the voice of rest shall you hear from heaven. Woe unto you, ye sinners, for your riches make you appear like the righteous, but your hearts convict you of being sinners. And this fact shall be a testimony against you for a memorial of your evil deeds. Woe to you who devour the finest of the wheat, and drink wine in large bowls, and tread underfoot the lowly with your might. Woe to you who drink water from every fountain, for suddenly shall you be consumed and wither away, because you have forsaken the fountain of life. Woe to you who work unrighteousness and deceit and blasphemy, it shall be a memorial against you for evil. Woe to you, ye mighty, who with might oppress the righteous, for the day of your destruction is coming. In those days many and good days shall come to the righteous, in the day of your judgment. Believe, ye righteous, that the sinners will become ashamed, and perish on the day of unrighteousness. Be it known unto you, ye sinners, that the Most High is mindful of your destruction, and the angels of heaven rejoice over your destruction. What will you do, you sinners, and whither will you flee on that day of judgment, when you hear the voice of the prayer of the righteous? Yea, ye shall fare like unto them, against whom this word shall be a testimony. Ye have been companions of sinners. And in those days the prayer of the righteous shall reach